Wow, I thought everybody was coming down here for Steve's. Oh, I know. They are, the beauty of the presentations, of all of them, has been that they pick out a piece of our conference life and they hit our congregations where they are. And that's why this has been so much fun to be a part of. And I thank you for your trust, and I thank you for your time. And I want to start, as I like to start, either with prayer or with a Bible reading. And that means I have to get my cheaters because I'm not as young as I used to be. And the Bible reading that I want to share, I didn't even check to see where the camera is. I hope I'm on it. Okay. Is the reading that I was going to share as part of my presentation, but just kind of had to edit on the fly. And it, for me, talks so completely about what a shared ministry can be. Now, our situation with, our arrangement with St. Mark's and St. John's kind of started as a shared pastorate, but very quickly evolved into a shared ministry. And so I would like to share this with you. It is out of the Message version of the Bible written by Eugene Peterson, and it is selections from 1 Corinthians chapter 12. It says, God's various gifts are handed out everywhere, but they all originate in God's Spirit. God's various ministries are carried out everywhere, but they all originate in God's Spirit. God's various expressions of power are in action everywhere, but God Himself is behind it all. Each person is given something to do that shows who God is. Everyone gets in on it. Everyone benefits. All kinds of things are handed out by the Spirit and to all kinds of people. The variety is wonderful. The way God designed our bodies is a model for understanding our lives together as the church. Every part dependent on every other part. The parts we mention and the parts we don't. The parts that we see and the parts that we don't. If one part hurts, every other part is involved in the hurt and in the healing. If one part flourishes, every other part enters into the exuberance. You are Christ's body. That is who you are. You must never forget this. Only as you accept your part of that body does your part mean anything. You're familiar with some of the parts that God has formed in His church, which is His body. Apostles, prophets, teachers, miracle workers, healers, helpers, organizers, those who pray in tongues. But it's obvious by now, isn't it, that Christ's church is a complete body and not a gigantic unidimensional part. It's not all apostle, not all prophet, not all miracle worker, not all healer, not all prayer in tongues, not all interpreter of tongues. And because I went back and looked it up and translated it in the Greek, it really should have been there, not all pastor. Okay, I don't know if Paul put that in there directly, but I'm adding it. Because that for me is kind of the nucleus of what shared ministry can look like. And the reason that I pulled out this section about gifts is because everybody thinks that, you know, I go to seminary and all of a sudden I graduate from seminary and I'm excellent at everything. That's what 3 years of 3 years of graduate level education, that's what it can do. Okay? You're excellent at everything. And the reality of it is I've got folks in congregations, and I've had folks in congregations for the long time that I've had the opportunity to do this, who are 10 times better at a particular gift than I ever will be. Yep. And so part of what this journey has been and continues to be as St. Mark's and St. John's come together is that I'm still trying to figure out where those wonderful folks are that can pick up a project and do it 10 times better than I can. That's why I was joking around a little bit about what does the pastor do and what does the congregation do. And I want to spend just another minute of your time, and I'm going to go at just a couple minutes, and then I'm going to open it up for questions, because I know there are some folks that have some questions. But those of you that are lay folks, And I have to confess that I really have to behave myself, because I've got two folks from St. Mark's who are sitting right there who journeyed through this whole process. So if they call BS, I'm in real trouble. I don't think they will. I think we're okay.
I think you're safe.
But for my lay folks that are in the room, what is the most important thing your pastor does? Help me out. What is the most important thing you think your pastor does? Yes?
In my case, I would say unify the congregation.
Unify the congregation. That is an excellent answer, because the component of leadership is very, very important. And so thank you. What else? What does your pastor do? I mean, come on, they work like at least 30 hours a week, don't they?
Facilitate.
Facilitate. Thank you. What else?
He's open to the parishioners.
Open to the parishioners. That's a very important piece. And that's a piece that has to be addressed in any kind of a shared ministry arrangement. So thank you very much. Nobody said preach? That wasn't the top three? Oh. What are we? Yeah. My clergy colleagues that are in the room are all sitting there going.
Kevin, I will say that when surveys have done on what we want in a preacher, preaching is always number one with churches when they begin their service. They want a good preacher.
Okay, if you couldn't hear that on the camera, what the better Kevin said was that preaching is indeed a very important piece of what our local congregations are looking for. So at least we can feel a little bit better for the amount of work that we put into it. Okay, pastors, my clergy friends that are in the room, what do you do all week? Nothing.
What don't we do?
What don't we do? Very, very interesting. That depends.
Well, I don't fix
Yeah.
cars.
You don't
Thanks
fix
be to God.
cars. That's good. I don't fix cars either.
Yeah.
It's a good thing I can preach. They don't let me play with power tools.
That's right. That's right. Same here.
Right. So, but pastors, what do we do? Because if everything is the answer, and I'm going to pick on you for a second, Dave, because I know that I can.
Absolutely.
If everything is the answer, then that thing that I just read about gifts, it's not applicable, because it doesn't allow our congregations to learn and grow. And I view that as one of the things that I do.
How can I put it? I said everything. That doesn't mean I do it all. That means I do a little bit of everything and a lot of some things. Like, I focus on preaching and teaching, word and sacrament and all that kind of good stuff. Admission, if I start sounding Lutheran, it's because I am Lutheran. I serve a Lutheran congregation. I used to see congregation, so just so you know. Anyway, but there's a lot of other correspondence. There's a lot of contact with parishioners. Some of it by phone, some of it by Zoom, some of it by physical visitation. There's hospital visitation. There's keeping in touch with what other ministry teams are doing. Sometimes that's a higher degree of involvement than with others. And you're right, being available, because all kinds of things come up and you never know, but you got to be ready to roll. So
True.
Yeah, filling quote unquote 30 hours a week. Ha ha ha. No. Yeah, it is not.
Yeah, I know. You got the joke. Yes.
I would say that part of what I'm doing a lot of is trying to take what's happening in our cultural and social context, and I'm constantly trying to run it through the filter of, help me Jesus, Holy Spirit, help me have a word for my people on Sunday about this. And I don't mean especially addressing the thing that because you can't possibly do all the things. It's the larger, and I'll call it anxiety, that we are living in. How do I funnel the anxiety of the moment to a word of hope, a word of love, a word of mission and change that's both comforting and challenging?
Yes. And I'd like to offer that is what, as clergy, we're trained to do.
Yeah.
And so many of the other pieces of church life that we still find, we as the folks that do this for a living, and I chose that specifically, it's so hard not to get caught up in the 10,000 other things that if I don't do it, oh, delegate, it's wonderful. Then it comes back anyway, 10 times bigger. And so it's a huge challenge, and it's a discipline that if any kind of shared ministry arrangement is going to work, in order to maintain what tiny little bit of sanity I had before I went into the ministry, it's a process of recognizing that there has to be definition, and there has to be those lines that say, I will do this, I will not do this.
I was going to say, you were reading from Eugene Peterson's paraphrase, The Message.
Yes.
Eugene Peterson has written some amazing stuff, books and articles on the calling of the pastor, what it is, what it isn't, and how to sort through. And when I find myself getting sidetracked, I often go back to Eugene Peterson. In part because he also grew up in Montana, and so if you're looking, I mean, he can be flowery, but if you're looking for flowery or sophisticated, yeah, that's not his approach.
Okay.
He's very matter of fact and really good at that.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. I originally had planned on going around the room and having everybody share, but we have a wonderful turnout. And so instead of doing that and having folks share a little bit about their situation, the first thing I would like to do is I would like to first open up. What brought you in? Were there particular questions from the presentation that stimulate more interest? Is there something else that you would like for me to address? And if that falls flat on its face, I'll keep going. But I would like to hear if there are pieces that you would like for me to continue with. Yes.
Okay, our church is, well, it was at one time a relatively sized church, maybe 400 members. At some point, we're now down to maybe 12, 15 coming to church on Sunday.
Okay.
We got a lot of politics. That's the thing that I didn't hear a lot about this morning, is the church politics of it. And if we were to decide to share share ministry, what would it look like? How would we figure out distance? How would we begin to talk about it when the people that you mentioned before that grew up in the church believe it's their own church? They don't want to do the work, but they don't want to not do the work. I don't know how to describe that, but we were just talking about that a little bit ago, and how complicated that is, and where, how to take any steps that we would, and how would we begin to find another congregation that would be compatible, or even opposite to us if they were working in the same kind of ministry.
Wow.
You ministers know it all.
Oh, yeah. Hey, 3 years of graduate level education. There we go.
Is everybody opposed to I take a few pictures?
Have at it.
But understand, that's why I'm not a pastor now. I did that for a year and a half, and I said, I can't handle the politics, and that's just supply. And now I supply, yes.
Okay, well, lovely, and thank God for you. And the other Kevin, thanks God for you.
But it's still my church, though,
Yes, you asked several questions, and let me try to pick them apart as best as I can. The first question you asked was, how do you deal with the church politics, so to speak? And how do you deal with the fact that there are sometimes small groups of people that dominate process, tend to be the ones that influence decisions the most, whether they're on consistory or not? As pastor, what I have tried desperately to do, and I think every presentation across the board today emphasized this, that there is a difference between being the church and serving Jesus. And I have tried my best and have relied on leadership that has been able to help folks understand that we have to go by what our gospel says. And maybe I'm preaching to the choir, but if we're not doing what the gospel says, and if we're worried more about what our building looks like, and if we're worried more about how in the world are we going to pay the insurance bill, then in some ways we're really losing the fight. And there are some folks, Ruth, that won't be able to hear that. And I had lifted up from this wonderful little book a point that the author makes that, I'm sorry if you didn't get a chance to see it. And yes, I make no profit off of this book either, but I recommend it to every pastor and lay leader that is out there. And no, I don't get a percentage. It is called Rich Church, Poor Church. It is written by a gentleman by the name of J. Cliff Christopher. There are no pictures, but he uses really small words. And if you look at it, it's thin, which means it maintains my attention. But one of the biggest things he talks about is the difference between serving Jesus and keeping people happy. And if all we're doing as clergy leadership is placating, then we're really behind the 8 ball. We're really behind the curve. So I think that kind of addresses your first question in a tiny little bit, that really you do that by being the church and recognizing that you can't always allow the loudest voices to be the ones that get the decisions.
Right,
Because-
our other challenge is that we don't have a pastor right now,
Yes,
and we haven't had one for a little over 2 years now.
okay,
We had an interim that was not functioning.
okay.
And so we're really in trouble, and we're trying,
And I'm gonna have the better Kevin also be listening in on this one as I lift up
I
something.
think he knows about it.
I'm sure. Are there other congregations in your area?
There are a couple of them.
Uh-huh.
But would our church be willing to even investigate the possibilities?
Well, okay. Let me share something again a little bit, and I'm gonna reiterate a tiny little bit, and then I'll move forward. With St. Mark's and St. John's, this started really with a process of dreaming and a process of exploration. And really it was spitballing. It was, can you imagine if we did this? That'd be great. And then just, it sat for a little bit. But as it continued to resurface, we then started thinking about, oh my goodness, this could possibly be. And we just continued talking about it. We talked about the pros and cons. We touched base with the Committee on Ministry and with the conference and made sure we had all our ducks in a row. We weren't stepping on nobody's toes. And then really we just introduced it to the congregations. In our particular situation, it was myself and some lay leaders from St. Mark's that originally approached St. John's with the understanding and blessing of the Penn Southeast Conference. In your situation, it might be, looking around a little bit. Are people willing to accept it or not? I don't know. But what I have been impressed by, are you ready, guys? You have to take this back to the consistory, okay? I'm looking at my St. Mark's people. What I have been most impressed by is that the lay leadership and the lay folks from both congregations, vast majority, not all, were interested in hearing what the possibilities could be. And then the other thing that we did, as also was common in several of the models that we heard talked about today, is we dated. We were joking around that we were hanging out together, but we're not getting married yet. We had a 90-day trial process. We had another 90-day trial process. Nobody signed on anything, but it was just a process of saying, can we live in this model? As far as suggesting who that might be, I don't know. But as far as looking at, are there other clergy, and this doesn't have to be a UCC thing, and that's the other thing that's beautiful about this particular arrangement, and with our denomination, and with the fact that we have mutual standing in multiple denominations, that there may be other congregations that are doing pretty good. You might be able to talk to them about, are there ways that we can share our gifts together? And I gotta tell you, Ruth, I was amazed. I was amazed by how the folks in these congregations came together and just said, oh my gosh, let's look at this. And even the people that said, oh my gosh, you're out of your mind, at least were willing to try. So I know that doesn't totally answer your question, but please, I can hear your frustration, and I can sense how you have a passion for your congregation. And there is hope, even when it doesn't always seem like it. So, please. Other thoughts, questions? Yes?
Suppose two churches wish to discuss date, and one church has more financially than the other. How, where do you go with that? How do you approach?
Well, that's a very, very good question. And I can simply share out of my own experience, okay? And it's no news to anybody in Schuylkill County. There's one of my congregations has a little bit more financial resource than the other one, okay? And they know who they are. The discussion focused some on the numbers, on the raw finances, and on how, yes, it really sounds nice if we can lop $50,000 off our annual budget. The conversation revolved more around how is this a mission for both congregations? And so we were able to soften a little bit, and I joked around at the presentation that I wasn't going to sit there and listen to percentages about which congregation is going to do what. Because I don't view myself as being 60% bound to one congregation and 40% bound to another congregation. I view myself as being full-time over two sites. And so part of the way to begin that process, and I'm going to quote Sean, and I'm going to quote the Better Together book, is how can we be better together? How can we serve Jesus Christ better together than we are doing as two congregations? And I hope that the majority of the folks from both congregations would be able to hear that it's not about which congregation happens to be bringing more finances to the table. It's about how the congregations can bring their gifts together, because I guarantee you that there are resources in that smaller congregation that blow away the resources in the congregation that might be a little more financially well off. And there are talented gifts and people in both congregations. And so, at least from the experience that I've journeyed through in Schuylkill County, we were able to get past the finances and just recognize that this is what each congregation is going to contribute. And then we have to work out and make sure that they feel that that balance is working out appropriately.
Thank you.
And it is a mission. And it's been amazing as the two congregations have gotten past the point of paying the bills to, oh my gosh, how do we keep each other strong? And that, oh my God, people, I can't tell you how amazing that is to see folks in that direction.
So I'm sorry, I just wanted to say, one of the things that I have found when I've talked to congregations about possibly sharing a minister is they'll often say, well, we did that one time and it didn't work out, right? and that's a reality, but oftentimes the issue is we felt that other church was the favorite of the other church, the pastor. So letting go of that idea that, that the pastor has a favorite, and the pastor has to be wise about how he or she navigates that. But the other side of it, to your point, this idea that, full-time position is 50 hours, they're getting 30 hours instead of the 20 hours. And this kind of sort of bargaining that we're not getting our value out of our pastor.
Okay.
The money we put in,
A couple things to address on that.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Well, the highlight of my ministry was serving 5 churches parish.
Oh my God, bless you.
And other churches I served, the church leaders felt that I should not know how much each person gives, because I should not pay attention to them in proportion to how much they give. And by analogy, if you're serving 2 churches or 3 or 4 or 5, whatever it is, you don't give attention in proportion to what they give. You go and minister to where the need is.
Right.
And it's just the same as with a local church one church with many members. You go where the need is.
Yeah, well, I'll argue the envelope thing with you at another time. But really, to begin to address Kevin's question a little bit, what's helpful for congregations to realize in a situation where both congregations, 2 congregations are sharing a pastor, my worship and sermon preparation carries to both congregations. My folks are in the hospitals pretty much in the same spots.
Yeah.
The churches are 1.5 miles away, So my visitations are often in the same spots. So I don't look at it as being pulled into two congregations. Half the time, I can't figure out which person I'm visited is from which congregation. And that's okay. As far as the balance is, it's both an internal process and an external one. I have to be aware that, I use the model of having kids. That I have to be aware that both congregations are getting my attention. The other piece of it that I didn't even begin to have the opportunity to talk about is that there is let me get this right, a covenanted ministry team that is made up of 4 members of each congregation. We have a document that was rewritten perhaps 8 or 9 times. I don't know, I got tired. That talks about how the relationship will work. And it is documented. And it is documented about how it will work. It's documented about what the responsibilities are for the covenanted ministry team. If there are people who believe that there is an issue, they will take it to their own consistory first. And then if the consistory feels that it needs to be forwarded to the covenanted ministry team, it would be the chance for folks from both congregations to be able to sit down, look at the issue, address it, and say, well, this is valid and needs to be addressed, or this, as we all get from time to time, is just somebody who's feeling grumpy. But it's incredibly important, and we laid it out from the get-go, that there is a covenanted guideline between the two congregations. Both congregations agreed on it. Both congregations voted on it at a congregational meeting, saw exactly what the course of action could be should somebody say, well, pastor's spending all their time over there and not spending any time over here. So thank you, Kevin, but that is part of it. And I have some copies. If I have some time, I'm going to spend a minute on it. Otherwise, if you want a copy, I can get it to you, or I'll get your email and I'll get it back to you. Okay, yes?
2 distinctions. The one is between sharing a pastor and sharing in ministry.
Yes.
And you kind of made that point in your presentation, but I think that's important.
Uh-huh.
Right now, I'm serving 2 churches, one Lutheran, one UCC. They're sharing me.
Yes.
That's about it.
Okay.
The other thing that I learned, because my first parish was a 2-church parish, and those 2 congregations had come together to share a pastor, and they even had a covenant like this and to kind of explain the relationship. The thing they never thought about was that the congregations had 2 different, what I called social vectors. Like the folks in the one congregation, they all headed in one particular direction for supermarkets. Their kids went to such and such school district. Their whole social orientation was that way. And the other congregation, their kids were in an entirely different school district. Their whole, they went to the grocery, they went to the library, they went to all that stuff that way. So they, even when they looked at their region, they didn't look at it through a common lens as their region, because their what I call their social vector was in 2 different directions.
Mm-hmm.
The blessed irony is that when I left that parish, the smaller of the 2 congregations said, "This is nuts. We aren't even looking in the same direction." And they ended up entering into a shared ministry covenant with another congregation that shared the same social vector, the same school district, this kind of thing. And they've hung together like that for 30 years, and they're doing great.
Awesome.
Because the match worked in part because when they had this sense of where's our mission field, they had an agreement of where that mission field was and a common kind of lens. Whereas previously, they didn't have that at all.
Well, not every experiment works on the first try.
No, it doesn't.
And it's
that's
nice to hear that they didn't give up.
Yeah.
And they kept going.
Yeah.
Awesome.
The other thing I learned with that was different congregations have different styles.
True.
And of course, now that I'm serving one Lutheran congregation and one UCC congregation, they've got decidedly different styles.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I well, fortunately I learned it before, but one of the things I had to learn was what are their styles? And honor their styles.
Yes.
Don't try and impose one congregation's style or even my personal style on another congregation. I just don't. And that's been really helpful to pay attention to that sense of congregational style.
Yeah. Thank you. Other thoughts, other questions for the moment?
I have a question.
Yes.
What do you find the most difficult doing the ministry?
What do I find the most difficult in this process? Thank you, Fran. One of my struggles, and I'll be honest with you, this is a struggle for me, whether it's one congregation or two, is being able to decide when enough is enough for today. And recognizing that, yes, there are demands from one congregation, there are demands from two congregations. That sense that I have done what I am going to do for today, unless, of course, the phone rings and somebody's in the hospital and you're in a car in 20 minutes. You know how that works. Another piece for me has been making sure, as Dave lifted up a little bit, making sure that I'm listening to both congregations and recognizing that at times there's going to be different answers. And that I have to be attuned to the fact that what may go over really well in one setting isn't necessarily going to go over the same way in another setting. What I'm going to say is the counter is also true. There are times when I've had, one congregational setting hear what another one's doing and go, oh my gosh, well, why are we doing it this way if we can do it this way? And so not only is there identity distinction, there is this wonderful sense of two congregations that are getting to know each other a little bit better. But as far as me personally, those have been my concerns. What I also want to lift up in the midst of my concerns, and this is particularly for my clergy colleagues, but also for anybody that's spent any amount of time on consistory. I had a couple of my colleagues say to me, are you out of your mind? Because these congregations are a little bit larger than what would normally be in this kind of an arrangement. Not huge, but St. Mark's, and please, I knew it, I was gonna forget, so I wrote it down. Hang on, where am I at? Okay, St. Mark's has a membership of about 320, an average attendance post-COVID of 50 to 70, and then you add in the wonderful online folks. St. John's has a membership of about 220. The average attendance post-COVID is about 40 to 50, and the online presence as well. And so, yeah, that's a math problem, but that adds up to 550 people. And the rolls are relatively clean. But quite honestly, what that allows for me is to be in a situation where there is a relatively well-supported pastoral compensation package that is spread out over two congregations. I know we as clergy have spent so much time sitting in those god-awful meetings as people are trying to decide how much we're worth being paid. And recognizing that chunk is often a significant piece of the local congregation's budget. So I'm in a situation now, thanks be to God, where it has actually energized two congregations because they're not as worried about whether or not they're going to be able to have a half-decent pastor. I guess I qualify as a half-decent pastor, I don't know. But they're more able to say, all right, oh my gosh, we've got this opportunity now. What are we doing? And there's been several mission initiatives that have come out of both congregations because they're not as worried about how are we going to make it from Sunday to Sunday. Mm-hmm. So while there are struggles, my answer to my colleagues who think I'm out of my mind is that yes, the work is hard, but I'm more confident and more comfortable. And I don't use comfortable in that sense of kicking back and it being easy. Comfortable in the sense that, I get my paycheck and I know that it's been earned and I know that it is given by two congregations who want to do it and who are in a supportive covenanted relationship. And so there are struggles, but I also wanted to lift up, friend, that there are incredible benefits. Because there's a lot of congregations that are sitting at 3/4 time or, are paying 3/4 time and expecting full time. And recognizing that there are some other models and some other opportunities and some other ways to look at this. So, thank you for the question. Yes.
How do you decide when it's time to look from a shared ministry to move to perhaps a merged situation?
Dan and Jean, cover your ears.
I don't see it happening with us.
That's a very, very good question. And Sean and I have had some limited discussion. For me, I didn't go into this relationship even whispering the M word. Okay? I have had it lifted up to me. I joke around that those are the dark alley conversations. Like, hey, pastor, can we think about this? And ultimately, we've been in the shared ministry relationship now informally for 3 years. We finally formalized it. What was that, like a year and a half ago we did the installation finally? Something like that. I don't remember. It's okay. And I think folks are still in the process of being able to see it. And I don't want to be the one that pushes even harder and further and pushes in a place where they're not quite ready. And so I'm allowing it to rise up from both congregations. And the other thing that I'll lift up that I will emphasize is that I have that luxury because we are in a position where this is not the final straw. This is not the last resort.
Yeah.
This is an opportunity. And I know that some folks are journeying in a different place, and that makes it a little bit more pressing. And that may have to accelerate that conversation a little bit. But folks, I think some folks understand the realities of it. Some folks will decide that they're just going to be the last person standing and they're going to lock the door. But I think there are so many folks who recognize that the legacy of their congregation, even if it can't continue in its current form, can move forward and plant seeds that they may never see, but it is the opportunity to utilize that collective history that's been somehow glued to the building and carry it forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other thoughts? Other questions?
Can you refresh my memory? Did you come from one church and then became pastor of two churches?
That is absolutely correct.
So when this occurred, and you sat with whoever you sat with, ancestry, whatever it was,
Yes.
how forceful were you in explaining that you were not going to be basically a full-time pastor to both? You were going to be one pastor serving two congregations, and they needed to do a little bit of work within their congregations to make it happen. Because you can't, you'd be working 80 hours
Correct.
a week.
And I won't do that because that's not good for me, God, or anybody.
Right.
That doesn't serve
And
either
how-
congregation.
How did you get that across to those congregations?
Sure. Straight up. St. Mark's was offering, I was, just so everybody's got the timeline, I was full-time pastor at St. Mark's first, and I've been there for 5 years. And this relationship has been going now for 3. But yes, I was full-time at the one congregation and then introduced this concept. You say how forceful. I don't know that I'm forceful. But I lifted up a couple of things to them. Because, the big thing that they, and again, as Steve lifted up, be honest. Be honest in your conversations. And maybe that was Steve or was that, it's been running. Be honest in your conversations. My honest conversation with St. Mark's was, all right, I'm here, I'm happy here, but the compensation package that you're offering me right now, while I'm appreciating it, does not meet Penn Southeast Conference guideline. I knew that when I took the job. But also, they knew it too. And so it then became the discussion about, well, are you going to leave us? My discussion back to them was that this actually strengthens the relationship for both congregations because both congregations are financially in a more stable place. That was one, and you start talking that with people who have been trying to meet the budget for the last 40, 50 years, it hits a note. And the other piece of it was, part of it is a duplication of labor. And so it's not like St. John's doesn't benefit from the work that I'm doing for St. Mark's and vice versa. So there is repeat on that. And that actually is an efficiency that's really, really helpful. And the other piece of it was, I said flat out, 90% of the folks in the congregation aren't going to recognize that there's a difference. Because I will be there in the hospital, I will be there in the nursing homes. Each congregation will have worship in their own facility on a Sunday morning. And it's only going to be the core leadership. They're going to have to recognize that there's some pieces that they're going to need to do a little bit more. And once I was able to explain that, I think folks got it. It kind of clicked. And they recognized that this isn't a loss. And it was hard to explain, and we had to explain this multiple times, and I still do. It wasn't a loss to St. Mark's as much as it was a strengthening of the mission of St. Mark's and St. John's. And I truly believe, and it's on the videotape, and I got people here, that St. Mark's is a stronger congregation because of this relationship and because of the ways that we've been able to figure out how to do this together. And while I've lost a little bit more hair, I think I'm in a healthier place as a pastor because I understand that I'm supported and that there are two congregations who are willing to try to give this a shot and are really making a maximum effort to make sure that this works.
And I understand that, but I think part of my question is, you were talking about as a pastor, what do we do? And we were talking about as a teacher, what do you do? It's the same thing.
Right.
We don't work 9 to 3.
Right.
So you had to make sure the congregations understood. Now, if you're on this committee, you do that committee.
Correct.
Now, you might report at consistory, but I'm not going to be a major part of that.
That is correct.
Maybe I was when I only had one congregation.
Correct. I do not go to all the committee meetings. I'm useless at half of them to begin with. There's nothing that I can offer that those folks don't have 10 times better than I do. And so it's a process of figuring out which teams at which time need my resource and which ones are happier that I don't show up. Hang on, David. Oh, no, I'm in trouble. Okay.
When we were trying to call a pastor, we basically ran the church as laity for about 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of had supply come in every now and then, but we didn't have a sitting pastor, or even really until the very end, we didn't have a supply pastor. So we got used to that. So we're not as needy, I think, in that regard. Now, St. John's also is made up of very, very strong people. And you gotta understand these Schuylkill County types.
I didn't say that.
I did. I've been there long enough. But they're very, very opinionated, very strong people. And so they were very willing to hash things out amongst themselves and not involve the pastor. So I think that's part of why we can get along in each congregation. And congregations have different styles, but ultimately we get along because we have a shared pastor, and we get along because we see that the congregations are thriving, and that's what it's for. That's why we have a pastor.
And I'm going to throw one more thing in there. And again, I don't want to echo this, but it's crucially important. It's incredibly important for local congregations to have an understanding of what they want their pastor to do. And if it is a situation where a congregation is expecting that the pastor is just going to hold their hand, do everything, and then just kind of sit back and allow a couple people to make all of the decisions, then this ain't gonna work. And frankly, the congregation's probably not going to thrive. This was a decision that was made between two congregations and one crazy pastor that said, there's a different way, and let's look at it. Okay. Other thoughts, other questions? Where are we at here? We are at 5 after the hour, so we have 5 more minutes and then we'll be sending you on your way.
I was going to chime in 2 things. The one, I started out full-time at my Lutheran congregation. Had to go down to part-time because, well, they didn't have the money to keep on trying to afford full-time pastoral staffing. And at the time, they were afraid that I was going to leave. And I explained to them, look, your situation isn't a commentary on the vitality of your ministry. It just is. And by the way, you are on the leading edge of a wave that, trust me, in 10 years, everybody around here is going to be experiencing that same wave. You're just on the leading edge. So my going to part-time does not make you less of a skilled congregation or less gifted. And I realize, congregations still work out of that ego. We're not legitimate if we don't have a full-time pastor. And that whole idea needs to be battled and just like.
And I think I want to lift up, I don't want to let this go.
Yeah.
I believe that St. Mark's and St. John's are proud in a good way that they have taken a risk.
Yeah.
And that they have taken a chance. And that they're on, oh my God, the fact that their pastor got to present before the conference, I mean, it scared the crap out of me. But that doesn't happen in Schuylkill County. That doesn't happen in these small congregations. The conference is over there, it's those churches. The fact that this is rising up from within, the nuts and bolts.
Sure.
And having two congregations that are happy and proud to be part of something that's on the cutting edge. I thank both congregations for that opportunity, and I'm glad that they're willing to do that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get the last word.
Okay.
So,
Go for it.
that's neat.
Hold it.
To my lay leaders, please don't lose heart. Please recognize that the Holy Spirit of God is doing amazing things that we couldn't even begin to imagine even 5 years ago. And so please try to keep at it, to keep the faith, to keep going. I would have laughed if I would have somehow heard, that wonderful crystal ball that said I would be doing this even 5 years ago. To my clergy colleagues, some of you who are still sitting there thinking, oh my God, he's nuts. There is a greater sense of peace and purpose in my journey now than there was before. Pretty much serving congregations that were always struggling to be able to hold on to one full-time pastor.
Yeah.
And that gets exhausting. And it has been an incredibly energizing process for me to be able to journey this process through. I'm going to say thank you. I'm going to close this in prayer. I'm going to stick around. If you're really interested in a copy of the covenant that we hacked out, I made 20 copies. If I don't have enough, I will jot down an email address and I will make sure that I get it to you. Friends, let's pray. Gracious God, we're trying. We are trying so hard to be your church in a world where it's a struggle sometimes even to figure out why it makes a difference. And yet, God, in this world, sometimes the church is the only thing that makes a difference. In this world where everybody is screaming at each other, in this world where everybody's trying to have their own opinion be the loudest, you come at us sometimes, God, with that still small voice that says that I am with you and that I am working in your life and in your world in ways that you may not be able to imagine yet. But please know that I am God. Please know that I am working. Please know that you are loved and that you are redeemed and that your work makes a difference in building the kingdom of God in this place, right here, right now. God, we ask you to bless the continued work of the Penn Southeast Conference as we journey into the rest of this gathering, and we do thank you for each person who has taken a little bit out of their lives to be here, to be the church in this place, and to dream of what can be. In the name of our risen Savior, we do pray. Amen.
Amen.
So just as an FYI, folks, August 12th, there'll be something from the conference, a workshop. That'll be a 3-hour conference on a Saturday morning. Details to be worked out, so look for your information in the e-news about this. And it'll get a little more detail about some things, okay? But thank you, Kevin.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for listening. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.